Hey, got an email. What's this say? Really? Hyperia vallied again? Man, can't catch a break with that thing. Guess I better... Oh, crap. Crap.
Now get ready. Here we go.
Oh, man. Geez, that was fun. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ride Mechanic channel. How the heck are you doing today? On today's video, we're going to talk real quick about over there at Thorpe Park, they vallied Hyperia again. And I wanted to talk about it on today's episode. So let's get right into that. If this is your first time here, make sure to like and subscribe. Do all that stuff downstairs. It helps me out and I do appreciate it. Alright, so over at Thorpe Park, they have a little problem with that Hyperia roller coaster. Seems to be a reoccurring problem. It basically vallied again in the exact same spot as it did before. It basically didn't make the outer bank turn. And they had the thing loaded with about half a train, from what I'm told, worth of water dummies on it. Seems to be a reoccurring problem, so it's like, what's going on with the ride? Well, the ride's brand new this year. You gotta remember, right? It's brand new. It's a brand new ride. So this year is the growing pains year. Basically at the park, at other parks all over the place, the more established rides have already had, they've already gone through these growing pains. And the maintenance department, the operations staff, they know what to expect. They know what happens to the ride in windy conditions. They know what happens to the ride in wet conditions. They know what happens to the ride in cold conditions and in hot conditions. You see where I'm going with this, obviously. So what are they doing right now? Well, they're basically writing the information down. It's like, hey, this time of day, this temperature, this wind speed, we know the vehicle can't make it back with less than half a train's worth of water dummies on it, essentially. So they're working for the long-term solution. What is that going to be? Well, the goal is to play with the wheel bearing grease and the wheel compound and get the two that very finite, that perfect balance between the two, between speed and being too fast and too slow, essentially. That way the thing doesn't valley anymore, but you can still make it around every morning. One of the things that roller coaster is going to have a lot of trouble with is, I can tell, never ridden it myself, but I can tell it's one of those rides that exerts a lot of force on the riders in a lot of weird ways, a lot of negative G-force and things like that. So rides like that, they like to move slow because they want to keep the external forces on the rider down. We all like to go on rides that have a lot of G-force where it pushes you down into the seat, maybe some laterals that kind of push you off the side. Some of us like the ejector time, some of us don't like that ejector time, but when you get that sustained negative G-force on your body typically doesn't like that feeling. It's not a good feeling. So they want to keep that type of stuff, and I'm really thinking about that overbank turn as it goes around the outside. They want to keep that kind of stuff limited down, so they need to try to keep the train as slow as possible going around those elements. But that's also some of the bigger elements to where the train is having trouble making it over. Goes up to go around that outer bank turn, and it can't do it, and it rolls backwards, and it valleys. So what's the solution? Well, the good news is that the ride has stators already on it. So it's like, hey, people have already asked me, can't they put some stators on it and get it to go faster? Well, yeah, they can, but it's not as easy as like Planet Coaster where you just click on the track and you tell it, hey, your stators now, go ahead and drive. It doesn't work that way. To actually install stators on a piece of track, here's what you got to do. You got to remove that piece of track completely. Any track? No, there's only a handful of sections in that ride that can actually have stators twisted on it. Typically, stators can be put on flat track, completely flat. They don't like to be put on bending up track or bending down track. Why is that? Why don't we want to put stators on track that bends up and bends down, assuming it's straight and in line? It's like, well, they don't want to do that because what happens is that the magnets don't travel all the way down parallel through that stator. It travels an arc through there, which means that the stator can put amount, like X amount of force out of there. And when you put an arc across it, they can't because you're losing surface area of the stator. Does that make sense? So imagine a stator can push 1 ton worth of force. It's like, okay, that stator can push 1 ton worth of force. Well, if you take those magnets on the train and you lift it up by 15, 20 millimeters, you just lift it up by 15, 20 millimeters, now that stator can only push 0.7 tons of force. Okay, push it up another 10 millimeters. Now that stator can only push 0.5 tons worth of force. See where I'm going? So as you increase the arc across that stator becomes less and less effective, which means you're putting a lot of electricity through there and you're essentially wasting power. That's not a good thing, which is putting wear and tear on the drive system, which they don't like that. So the other question is, well, what about booster wheels? Booster wheels can be used, but you have to control them. So you would need the right shape, size booster wheel. You need the right RPM. So if you say, hey, the train needs to be going this fast, you have to pick a motor, gearbox, and wheel combination to get the right RPM turning. And then what you have to do is you have to have those, in Hyperia's case, it would be lowered. You have to have them lowered down out of the track. And then when the train comes by and goes slow enough, those wheels would come up and push against the bottom and continue to try to drive it forward. The crappy part about that is that when you have to change those wheels, which happens all the time with booster style devices, when you have to change those wheels, that means you're carrying a wheel up 100, 200 feet in the air to replace those things. It doesn't work out well. So stators would be the best bet, not the greatest though. So let's go over that again. I'm sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought on that. What? You lost your train of thought? No way. I know, it happens from time to time. What were we talking about? Booster wheels? No, we weren't talking about booster wheels. We're talking about stators. We're talking about track that stator mounts on. Okay, so what you would do is you would take that piece of track that you're going to mount the stators on because it's perfectly straight, remember? Doesn't twist left or right because you can't put just stators on a twisting track. So you take that perfectly straight piece of track that's probably curved up or curved down, and then you have to remove it from the ride completely. Put it on a truck, send it back to the manufacturer or wherever the track was manufactured, because that's not necessarily the same place on a lot of rides. So that shows up there, and then they have to take those cross ties out of the center. That's when you're looking at the track, you have your left rail and your right rail, and the cross tie is the metal tie that joins it together. So you have to go in and you have to take those cross ties completely out of those rails till they're gone. And then you have to weld in new ones with a modified lower crossbeam. It actually might be lower, it might be higher, depending on which way the track is chordaled. Is it going down or is it coming up? So that it might be higher or lower depending on what it is. And then you ship it back. Now you have a place to mount the stators. Now you could purchase the stators. Right now, these days, adjusting for inflation, oh my gosh, inflation. Oh, that's going to kill me. All right, so adjusting for inflation and some price timeline stuff, I'm willing to bet, I'm sorry, I know we're over there in the UK, but I think of everything in US dollars. So I'm willing to bet one of those stators, a stator right now, probably costs right about 20,000 US dollars, which is pretty close to the currency over there. So what is that? Is that is that the pound? Or is that the euro? No, it's not the euro. It's pound, I think. But it's pretty close. They're all pretty close to each other right now. So it's going to be close to 20,000 US dollars, I'm going to say. So those guys are going to be pretty expensive considering you need a pair of them, and you'll probably have to put in 2, 4, 6 to 8 stators worth. So, and then you have to run the control wiring down and go back to the nearest cabinet, and then you have to tell the drive, hey, by the way, you now have another motor attached to you. And you have to add more sensors out there to tell those motors when the train gets in them and which way the polarity of the magnets is going to know when to fire. Well, that's just the drive, which is the control system, so that is by default a safety system. And then you also have to go into the ride's control system, and now you have to tell it that it's safe to talk with the drive when it comes to that particular motor. So you're actually looking at reprogramming the entire ride to add a set of stators out there. It's not a great thing. It's going to cost a lot of money. The ride loses all of its safety rating. As soon as you open up the program, the safety rating goes out the window. So when the manufacturer, I'm assuming the manufacturer would do this change. Not many other places would, especially with the rides only being a year old. The manufacturer would go in, make the modifications, add the stuff to the drive, redo all the testing and everything else, and then you would need that external body to come back in to recertify the ride, whether it was local jurisdiction to the park or an external third party, something like, I know, over in Germany and places like that, they like to use the TUV. I'm not sure how big the TUV is over there in the UK. I think it's the same. I'm not 100% sure on that one, though. But you need an external body to come in and redo the safety rating on the ride before it could be re-permitted and cleared to open back up again. Off-season work for sure. Could it be done? Yeah. Going to cost a lot of money? Oh, yeah. It's going to cost a lot of money. Do they want to do that? Maybe they do. I don't know. That realistically is dependent on the park itself. Because if the maintenance department is sitting there going, we've got the manufacturer working on it, we're working on it, and we just can't figure out how to get it to run stable, and maybe they're even forecasting right now and say, hey, you know what, when it gets a little bit colder, we're going to have some serious trouble once this thing gets colder. You could do stuff like you could warm the wheels up and things like that. Those are temporary solutions to those problems, and they're not great either because there's a lot of upkeep and maintenance with those things that a lot of people just don't want to do. I don't recommend doing stuff like that. Look for those long-term, more in-depth solutions. But if the maintenance department is at its wit's end, then it's like, we just don't know what to do with this thing in order to make it run more reliably in cold weather, then they might have to start looking externally and say, okay, what is it going to cost to put stators on the ride? What's it going to cost to do this or to do that? Something that I don't think they would do, but is also an option rather than drive modification, which actually seems like the simpler solution here, would be to redo that part of the track, right? Take that outer bank corner and actually redo the track going to it and lower the corner down by 50 feet. And then then the train can carry more speed through there. But I imagine at that point they'd have to redo the outer banking on it as well to try to reduce the forces on the rider. Because again, it's the high speed that they don't want through that. So actually, that whole thing doesn't make sense. Never mind. You know what? Scratch that, reverse it. I don't like that one. We don't like that at all. Let's not do that one. No. Am I going to edit that out? No, I'm not going to edit that out. I'm just going to let it go through. And then I'm going to lose my train of thought right in the middle of it. What was I talking about? Are we still talking about breadsticks? No, we're not talking about breadsticks anymore. So anyways, the news that Hyperia vallied again, I didn't really think it was really needed a video brought out about it, except for, hey, it's growing pains of the ride. They've got to work through it. They've got to figure out the problems. And honestly, it might take a couple years to get through those growing pains, but eventually they'll figure it out and it will become even more stable and reliable. And I know lots of roller coasters that have opened up in their first couple of years of operations. They've valleyed like crazy, and they just have to keep recovering it and recovering it until they really figured out the rule book and figure out what they could do and what they could not do with that ride. I think that's going to do it for this video. Just a real short one, I know, but I'm making a lot of videos this week. Like and subscribe, do all that stuff downstairs. It does help me out. If you want to contact me, you can always message me below, or you can leave me an email at ryantheridermechanic@yahoo.com. And of course, stay off the ear gates. Bye.